Before we start, there is a 3-minute clip that was made by Saba's brother, Mahmood. It was played at in Memorial University, and he very kindly sent it over. So it's a personal documentation with photographs and a poem by Nasir Kazmi. We play that and then. लोग तुम ही गए हम इसको समझा था कि तुमने बांधा था कोई यारों से पैमाने बका और खाने में तामुल था अगर रोजे बका को अच्छा था ठहर जाते तुम भी। Friends, Saba was a colleague, but more than that, a friend of many, many years. I promised myself not to say more because it is difficult enough after even a month to go through the memories. And the saddest part is the promise of such an eminent friend, such a dear friend and an eminent scholar who left behind in a short life so much for us. We're gathered today to thank her, to remember her. If my words are disjointed, I'm sorry, I haven't written anything. I just wanted to say things as they came to me. But those of you who do not know, and I sent a note yesterday, Saba was born in Quetta. Her father was in the police service and grew up in Karachi. She went to Habib School in Karachi. And after her matriculation and intermediate, she came to National College of Arts for a year or two. And our very dear Rubina Nadir met her there. Right, Rubina? Huh? Rabia Nadir, I'm so sorry. This is Ali Khan telling me that, Rabia Nadir. I'm so sorry, Rabia, I apologize. Rabia Nadir. And to the extent that she became not only a dear friend of Rabia, she became part of that family. And her parents are here who were like her own parents and who loved and cared for her and were always there for her throughout her life. So Rabia hopefully will speak today. After she left MCA and went to University of Washington, Seattle to get a bachelor's degree in architecture. After that, she got a master's in urban planning and architecture from University of Michigan. And following that, she practiced architecture in Seattle. And while there, she basically switched her line of her profession or her discipline, got an MA in political science, and in 1993, she got accepted in the anthropology department at Stanford, where she received her PhD in 1998. She did her first fieldwork in Egypt, actually. Her second book is also in Egypt. There are many things that we can talk about her career, but her two most important books are Politics of Piety, the Islamic Revival and Feminist Subject, which was published in 2005 by Princeton University Press, and her second book, which came out in 2016, Religious Difference in a Secular Age, a Minority Report. And we have colleagues and friends here who will be speaking on both these books. How we'll start is that Saba was invited to LUMS in March of 2016 by my friend and previous dean of the school of Romani School, Munir. And Professor Munir had asked Saba to come and spend a few days with colleagues and faculty, and she gave a 2-day seminar here. Actually, incidentally, I was there, and Rabia and myself and Kamal have a lovely photo, which is not part of this, in his room during that time. And she was extremely delighted to be back, and for the first time was starting to think about coming back to Pakistan and beginning a new project, which would basically bring her back to her own country. That was not to be soon after she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She fought it, actually. I would even say struggled, and remained vibrant, active, energetic, not only in her personal life but in her professional life. We have a student of hers here, Hayat, who took courses with her, whom she taught. Her sister Myra just wrote that she was one of her last students because Saba was teaching since fall of 2017. And but unfortunately, we lost her on the end of March. Let's begin. Let's show you a clip from the interview she gave at Lams about her own work and her reception in Pakistan. Following that, I will ask our other guest speakers today, and I just named them. We'll start with Dr. Ali Qasmi, who teaches history at Lams. Following that, we'll ask Zara to come and say a few words. Following that, we will ask Ali Raza, do you mind?
Sure.
I'm just doing
Sure.
gender balance. Ali Raza, who's also in the history stream here and teaches, Dr. Ali Raza teaches here. After that, we will have again a dear friend who is visiting and who is in a certain kind of an intellectual dialogue, not that Qasmi Saba and Saba not, is Dr. Umaira Iqtidar from King's College London. Following that, we will have our very own, not that others are not our very own, Dr. Noman Faizi, who's in our religious studies program. And finally, we'll have Rabia Nadir, who is a faculty member at Lahore School of Economics. Again, I apologize. I don't know who to be nice. I promise. My friend Ali Khan keeps on telling me that there's something wrong. Every name I utter during meetings is and then they people think it's okay. So I think for a dyslexic person to become dean of a school is very dangerous. But there are lots of friends here as well who knew Saba personally and for a very long time. Dr. Samia Iqbal is here, and who also knew Saba from when we were all in Karachi in the 80s. And she's reminding me of the photograph that I hope she never shows. So. But let us watch the interview and then we will move on.
Politics and piety raised some controversy, I believe, in Pakistan. And I think the source of that is, in some part, a misunderstanding of the argument I've made in the book. And in part from the idea that in order to understand, that if you are spending so much time and effort in trying to understand a form of Islam that many liberal progressive Muslims in Pakistan oppose, then that kind of work immediately is understood to be suspect. So the idea that has angered people is that why am I taking these movements so seriously, and that why am I not condemning them enough? My response to that is very straightforward and simple. My response to it is that I am, if I was to condemn those movements, that does not mean that you or I or anybody has understood them any better. You can condemn as much as you want, but there are a large percentage of the world's population that is persuaded by the ideology and practices of such movements. So my task as a scholar is not simply to denounce, but to try to understand what motivates people to be involved in these movements, and to take their practices and ideas seriously rather than simply to say that they are victims of a false ideology. So I think this is one of the reasons that people seem to have difficulty with politics of piety. And I also think that many of the philosophical concepts that I use in politics of piety to analyze this movement are not necessarily very familiar to the readership, so they tend to misunderstand what am I talking about. It is often argued that because of the kind of religious extremism that exists in Pakistan, the solution to it is more secularism. That the reason we are suffering from the problems of fundamentalism and fundamentalist Islam is because our state is not adequately secular and the population at large is not adequately secular. Now, if you think about how the term secular is used, or how secularism is used in this kind of an argument, it is that secularism is actually the absence of religion, or it is the separation of religion from state. Now, this is an old idea. It is an idea that has existed since in liberal political thought, since the end of the 19th century and onwards. But in the last 20 years, this idea that secularism is about the separation of religion and state, or that it is about the absence of religion, as some people would say in Urdu, is la dini, is non-religious, has really been challenged by scholars. In the Anglo-European literature, this has really been challenged by a whole set of theorists and historians and anthropologists. And they argue that actually secularism is not the separation of religion and state. And in fact, what you have in modernity, in the modern period, is actually the modern state has become more and more involved in the regulation of religious life and religious institutions. And so secularism is not simply the separation of religion and state. In fact, secularism is the increased involvement of the state in the regulation of religious life, such that the state is given the power to be able to say what is proper religion and what is not. Now, when Islamist movements argue or struggle for seizing the state and making state their weapon through which, or their means through which they want to Islamicize the society, they're actually very much a part of the modern conception of the secular state, in which they think that it's only through seizing the state that they're going to make the society more religious. Now, this idea that it is only through the state that you can moralize a people and make them morally more pliant is a very modern conception. Even though, of course, in history, empires have existed, certainly Islamic empires, Umayyads and Abbasids and so on have existed. But mind you, that they did not consider their aim to necessarily Islamicize them. Yes, they converted and so on and so forth, but the conception of the pre-modern state was very different from the conception of the modern state. And so it is only in the modern state, and it's not only in Islamic societies, that you get this sense that the state is really the arbiter of creating a morally religious, compliant society. So Iran is an example, Saudi Arabia is an example. And these states are no less modern than other states of Europe or America. Now, of course, there are differences between them. Clearly, the Iranian state embraces Islam as its political ideology in a way that's, let's say, that the American state does not. However, even in America, Protestantism is a very crucial aspect that informs almost all laws and practices. And it has a different structure, which is not the same as that of, let's say, the Iranian state. But nonetheless, you cannot therefore say that it is any less or more secular than other kinds of modern states. So this is the way in which the relationship between religion and secularism has been really reconceptualized in much of the recent literature. And so in my recent book, which is called Religious Difference in a Secular Age, I try to actually think about what religion has become under the regulation of the modern state, particularly in Egyptian history and in the case of Egypt.
That is as good an exposition of the work than any one of us can give, of course. I invite Dr. Ali Qasmi to share. Our colleagues will speak for around 10 minutes, and in the end, there will be time for people for reflections, for comments. So, Ali.
Thank you so much, Kamran, for arranging this and for giving me this opportunity to talk about Saba Mahmood and her work a little. I mean, I have not known her personally. She was here to conduct a workshop, and that was a fascinating experience for all of us. I mean, some of people who attended this workshop are sitting in this room, and they can they can tell you about their experiences, but for me it was incredible. There's something incredible about her methodology, that she had assigned readings, and then there will be a paragraph citing Foucault, and then she'll start off saying that let's unpack it, and unpacking of it would really show the expertise that she had, and really that she could do the genealogy of ideas and talk about them with such ease. I mean, that was inspiring, and that was incredible. And when she was here at Club, she gave me a copy of a book, and she was so, humble, and she was so generous with the time. She spent a lot of time talking to anyone who was interested, to students, to faculty, and discuss and share ideas. And this book, her recent publication was on religious minorities and minority report. And I read it, and unlike her previous work, Politics of Piety, which is, this is also very dense, but it's written in a way which is more accessible, it's more easy to read. And it really felt like, and I wrote to her afterwards saying that it read like a thriller of sorts. And I was, so carried away. And the argument itself was so exciting that I wrote to her that it's as provocative as your previous work. And I asked her about her opinion of what she thinks of Ashish Nandi and T.N. Madan, who also written critiques of the idea of secularism, as to how an alternative conceptualization of management of religion is possible, in the sense that the inherent kind of plurality among individuals in India can be invoked to tackle the problem of religious violence or extremism. And she wrote back, she responded, which was again generous of her. And she said that, firstly she said that I'm glad that you find my book compelling, and in brackets she wrote provocative. She said, I've read the critique of Indian secularism, but found them conceptually quite different from the argument I follow in my book. I'll have to go back and check my notes. And she says, okay, I had, what Nandi is doing is making a distinction between ordinary people's religiosity, which is pluralistic, open, flexible according to him, and that of state, closed, ideological, inflexible. I do not think that such a distinction is tenable, because the modern transformation wrought in the concept and practice of religion affects ordinary people's religiosity as well. State regulation of religion transforms the very grounds on the basis of which religion can be imagined and practiced. Furthermore, I do not think that people's religiosity is any more open and pluralistic than that of state. I find Nandi's celebration for people's inherent pluralism quite suspect. Madan and Nandi wrote a couple of essays on Indian secularism, but never developed a larger analytical framework, and the conversation on secularism got a lot deeper and diverse in the years since they first wrote, hence my absence of engagement with the dialogue. Now this gives you, the reason I'm reading this out is to just give an idea as to Saba Mahmood's engagement with secularism is not just to suggest as if secularism as an ideology, as a concept, has become redundant, but to suggest that the kind of comfort that we have developed with secularism as a political ideology, which is some sort of a panacea or panacea for dealing religious extremism, is not valid, and that we need to go beyond its conceptual basis and even to challenge the very basis of secularism. And tied with it is the idea of how secularism is inherently tied with nation-state and nation-state's majoritarianism. And in case of Egypt, for example, she has focused on a Coptic Christian community, and how the demand in every modern nation state of certain religious groups is to get recognition by the state, to be recognized as a minority, and that minority in itself then becomes this kind of a category through which they can their rights can be recognized and through which they can be protected as citizens. I'm sorry, I do not intend to sort of provide a brief summary of her work. I'm sure most of you are better informed about it than I am. My only, contribution is to suggest that how useful I find her work in case of Pakistan, for example. because when she says that there is that the category of minority itself is now the only way through which minorities can be, or groups who fall outside the majoritarian definition of the nation state, whether that majoritarianism is defined along the lines of ethnicity, religion, language, or race, can be afforded certain kind of rights of protection. So, and she invokes Hannah Arendt to say that the right to have rights in that sense is only if the state accords you this recognition of being a minority. And in my own work, I find it so useful, and I can relate to that argument, because if you look at the way similar debates have been carried out in case of Pakistan, especially with regards to the Ahmadiyya problem, that the demand to declare Ahmadis as non-Muslims, when it was first raised in Pakistan in 1953, the protesters who were demanding, making these demands, they used the term non-Muslim and minority interchangeably. And then you similarly find that when actual legislation or amendment was carried out in 1974 declaring Ahmadis as non-Muslims, at one point the Attorney General of Pakistan, Yahya Baftiar, asked the Ahmadi Caliph, saying that if you want your rights to be protected, agree to be a minority. Right? So we are declaring you a minority so that your rights can be protected. I mean, I could just see Saba Mahmood's argument in just one interaction which took place in the National Assembly of Pakistan on that particular occasion. And Mirza Nasir Ahmed, but then Mirza Nasir Ahmed says that no, we do not want our rights to be protected. Right? So that's the inherent tension in the modern nation state and its aims to exercise religious neutrality. And the inherent tension, or the reasons for which the nation state is always suspect of its minority. That on the one hand, it creates minority as a category so that certain rights can be protected. At the same time, it is inherently suspect of the same category because it challenges the majoritarian basis of the state. Lastly, again, as Saba Mahmood you just saw the video in which he said that secularism is that you get to hear a lot in Pakistan that the problem with Pakistani state is that it's not secular enough. And at the same time, people who think that the state is not secular enough, in a way they're trying to say that there is not enough separation between religion and state. At the same time, these are the same people who insist that Friday sermons should be the prerogative of the Pakistani state. The state should determine as to what is being said in Friday sermons. Right? So that's the inherent kind of paradox which is out there, which is very obvious. And again, you get to have an understanding of this paradox through a reading of Saba Mahmood's work, and it shows you again that how relevant it is to our broader context as well. It's not something which is applicable in case of Egypt, but with certain kinds of modifications one can argue that it is useful in understanding the kind of problems that we face in case of Pakistan as well. Yes, and that's all what can we say about Saba Mahmood, and in the sense that her scholarship and the ways in which she became this stellar kind of Pakistani academic non, the most international face of Pakistani academia scholarship, and it's and we can only wish that she had lived for many more years. Thank you.
If I could invite Zahra, actually reminded me that she did her computer science bachelor's from LUMS in 2002. And then she has a career as a lawyer, and a few years ago she joined the anthropology department at Berkeley, where she was a student herself.
This morning I got a message from my sister who Ramana's already mentioned. She likes Saba as well. She's in California at the moment. Saba knew Myra, so I think she'll find the message hilarious. My family has a morbid fear of expressing emotion publicly. And Myra's message said, don't start crying in the middle, take drugs if you have to. Like most messages from my sister, this one makes little sense. I didn't take drugs, but I think it will be okay either way. I want to start by playing the song. It's a poem by Fairs that I've read constantly since Saba died. Saba loved Fairs. We shared a lot of poetry in the last few months of her life. This particular version is sung by Harim Sobel, and I'm touched by its beauty. I never sent this poem to Saba because I didn't think it was good for her. But today I want to play it for her and for all of you. In those 2 years, without her knowing it, she was teaching me the final lesson of heart attack. I watched the denouement, the stunning final act of her life unfold. Her departure was premature but not hasty. Death waited for Saba. Perhaps it too was curious. Who was this woman who refused to capitulate to it? Who stood up to it with such grace? Who insisted that it wait, for she was not yet done? Those familiar with her work know that actions mattered a lot to Saba. Looking back over those years, my question to myself is, what did Saba do now that death had announced itself, but left the exact moment of his coming indeterminate? How did she sustain the urgency that now infused every conversation, each moment, and not let it paralyze her? How did those conversations bear the weight of their finality, this compressed time frame? Where previously a thought was conceived in the expectation of spanning decades, it now had to be contained within a few conversations, maybe just one. Saba was enmeshed in one of the vastest, most intimate and intense webs of human connectedness I've seen. Her relationships with people spanned decades and continents, and she nourished each one of these with the genius of her intellect, emotional incisiveness, and infinite reservoirs of care and wisdom. How did she nourish so many relationships and contain so many people's fears and anxieties when she herself was, I presume, for I never saw it, terrified? What do I need to do to be brave like Saba, or simply to be a bit more like Saba? It may take a lifetime to answer these questions, but she has left me with enough to sustain her inquiry. Maybe I will read our time together like a text, an art she had known through perfection, but that I was just beginning to learn from her. By sharing the end of her life with me, she gave me the opportunity to watch her master at work, writing the epilogue to her magnificent earth, performing her ethics of laboring and dying, of dying and living. The lessons are there, the text has been written, but cruelly the teacher has left, and the reader, anonymous, is afraid. You broke the contract, Saba, and left before I could ask you to explain this nuance or that paradox, before you'd held my hand long enough for me to be able to read like you. Extrapolation is now my friend, but it's cold comfort. When you told me I must come to Berkeley, I did so in the expectation of your being with me, not just for the length of the PhD, but forever. Every time I read the Share by Fairs, I think of you, but only with love. हम तो मजबूर वफा हैं मगर ये जाने जहाँ अपने उशाक से ऐसे भी कोई करता है. Part of our kinship was based on our shared home country, Pakistan, our common first language, the language of poems we loved and shared, the only language a part of our soul speaks. There are intimacies possible only among those who share past lives, and with you, they are gone. As Saba was dying, she taught. The theme of the last course I took with her was hope, and her question was, how can we locate hope amid devastation? She showed me what it means to read as if your life depended on it. She taught me the absolute importance of collective reading and thinking, that they are worth doing even when the world is collapsing, even when you are being taken from all that you love. They are not luxuries for the mind at ease. They can offer answers to those who are broke. Maybe they can even save us. Saba, the theorist of performativity, performed this commitment by engaging in collective reading and thinking until the last weeks of her life. Saba when teaching was always a phenomenon. Anyone who sees the auditorium packed with 500 people knows this. But watching Saba teach in that precarious, defiant spring of 2017 was something else altogether. She was urgent and passionate, but also calm. We were all too aware of time closing in on us, but somehow, for a few hours each week, she managed to trick us into a different temporality, one where we would all meet again, where every moment wouldn't be freighted with the impossible burden of learning her completely and then never forgetting, overwhelmed by the terrible knowledge that she would not be back. We were no longer Saba's carefree students. And as Saba was dying, she loved. Hers was a love that once bestowed flowed unconstrained, and death's coming was powerless before it. If you were lucky enough to be within the ambit of Saba's ethics of care, and it was a vast ambit, her commitment to your well-being would continue, at least until the day she died. In those 2 fraught years, many barriers would come down. For example, there was no longer time for me to remain intimidated by Saba Mahmood, the world-renowned scholar. The stakes were too high for me not to tell her what she meant to me, and she responded. How infinite her capacity to love must have been, to make room for a new relationship, even as she was trying to obtain closure on her numerous existing ones. The final email I sent her was a love letter. Some of you have read a version of it, but it was her I first sent it to. I did not want to write Saba's obituary. I wanted to tell her while there was still time, and I did. In her final email to her friends, sent by her husband Charles after she died, she left us with these words by Raymond Carr. And did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so, I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved of the earth. In those final months, what did Saba's life, honed to a razor's edge, look like? Remarkably similar to what it was before. And here lies a real lesson, imparted quietly but staggering in its implications. Saba was already living as if she were dying, even before death's first reminder came. She was living how we should all live, for death is as much our companion as it was hers. The difference is simply that death granted her the mercy of an interval, one it may not allow us. And what a reckoning it must have been. How glorious to be able to stare death in the face and say, you don't have much that is new to teach me, for I've already lived in anticipation of you. I've lived passionately, authentically, lovingly. What she, masterful teacher, has shown us is not how to die, but how to live. In the end, she left an opening. The last time we spoke, she told me I could continue to write to her after her death. It is a doorway to another realm, one I don't yet know how to access. But I am Saba's student, and I will learn. Today, let me make another claim upon her, in our language of love. Saba, तुम बहुत याद आती हो, पर वो मेरे पुराने साथी, किताब और कलम अब कमजोर पड़ गए हैं, पर कैसे ना पढ़े? जिसने पढ़ना सिखाया हो, उसके जाने के दुख का मुदावा किताबें कैसे करें? जिसके लिए लिखने की आदत हो, उसके गम को तहरीर कैसे मतन करें? और कौन रह गया है पढ़ने वाला? मुझे पढ़ाने वाली और मेरे डरपोक लड़खड़ाते अल्फाज को पढ़ने वाली, जाते जाते किताब और कलम का सहारा भी लेकर जाओगी, लेकिन इनके सिवा कोई चारा नहीं, ये भी तुम ही ने सिखाया है। हमारी दुनिया किताब और कलम की दुनिया है। कुछ दिन पहले तुम्हारी किताब खोली, मेरे हाथ कांप रहे थे। तुम्हारे अल्फाज निष्ठर भी थे, दवा भी। सफाक मसीहा इसे कहते हैं। तुम जहाँ भी हो, मेरी आवाज़ सुनती रहना और मेरे अल्फाज पढ़ती रहना। बहुत कुछ सिखा तो गई हो, लेकिन मेरी उस्ताद, मेरी दोस्त, मेरी सबा, जीने को तो अभी एक उम्र पड़ी है।
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamran, for the opportunity. Thank you all for coming here. If it's all right, if you permit me, I would like to read a statement by our friend and colleague, Manan Asif, who is an assistant professor of history at Columbia. He came across this announcement of this memorial for Saba Mahmood, and he asked if his tribute could be added. So I'll just read out a short note, if that's okay, from Manan. I want to thank the organizers of this event for allowing my voice to be added. I am sorry that I cannot be there in person to memorialize my teacher and intellect which nourished all of us. My first real memory of Professor Mahmood's class, Secular Governance and Religious Knowledges, the case of South Asia and the Middle East, remains one of pure panic. And having attended Saba's workshop at NOMS, I can attest to that. I had never been so intimidated and impressed simultaneously. It was my first semester at University of Chicago, and I was very new to the social sciences. The panic came from the fact that I had not read any of the books she had assigned. I was studying early Islam. I left her session and walked over to the library and checked out every book with the name Michel Foucault, Talal Asad, Partha Chatterjee, and so on. Her introductory lecture had completely and utterly grabbed me and transformed my classes approach. Over the course of her brief time in Chicago, she was a great guide, a mentor, and a corrective. She went out of her way to speak with me, introduced me to other faculty, and encouraged me. She left for Berkeley, but I continued to see her at various conferences and different emails and committees and events. In all her dealings, her seriousness of intent, her ethical engagement, and her smile and cheerfulness shone through. I have lived with Professor Mahmood's work throughout my academic life, having taught her books in many classes. Nowadays, I regularly teach a class on political theory from Hobbes to Foucault, and I'll always include her critique of Martin Marty's Fundamentalism project she wrote as a graduate student at Stanford in 1994. It is a straightforward review, but contains a very telling paragraph that asks, how is it that the politics of modernity, or secularism, do not involve the history of modern making, and I just lost my line. How is it that the politics of modernity or secularism don't involve the history of modern making or secular making in the world, and the damages that these processes inflicted on brown and black bodies in the colony? After reading Amy Césaire and Frantz Fanon, the students are always glad to see that continuity of a radical critique of enlightenment is carried on by a woman of color. We traffic in a world where genius is gendered, where arguments that are to be contested are gendered, where impact on thought is gendered. Saba Mahmood's peers and elders, male academics of the Subaltern Collective, or those who worked and theorized secularism like Charles Taylor, had nothing to say about gender, nor anything to say about Muslims. that her thought honed in on that very lack and created new spaces of ethical articulation is thus far more radical an inversion than is understood on the surface. That she confronted liberalism with respect to the veiled Muslim woman and granted her interiority and agency will remain a golden benchmark for all those who dare challenge the Enlightenment's self-professed truths. Saba has bequeathed us that heritage and we are blessed to have received it. I will only add to Manan's note with a personal tribute. In some ways, it feels really fresh talking about Saba Mahmood, not least because I have been teaching her work to my students for the past 2 weeks. I teach her work on the Politics of Piety, her first seminal classical text by now. And each time I have to say, I go back to Saba Mahmood's work to teach my students. I come back having learned something new. I suppose that is a defining mark of all great texts, whether it's Sayyid's Orientalism, whether it's Spivak's Critique of Postmodern Reason, whether it's any other great text that one can think of. The Politics of Piety also, and her last book on secularism, also has that impact on the reader. One never fails to come back, not having learned something new each and every time that one reads it. I am drawn to her work, and I won't spend a lot of time in summarizing it. She did that perfectly well, actually, in the video that we saw. I'm drawn to it personally because it really throws open some of the most deepest held conceptions and notions regarding questions of agency, questions of freedom, questions of empowerment. And she takes aim at the transparent universalism of the Enlightenment and Enlightenment humanism. And really it forces us to interrogate the claims that this brand of humanism basically advances. But more personally, on a personal note, reading Saba Mahmood and her work is always an experience in basically being schooled. It's like attending class, in which you're patiently tutored and mentored by a generous and a giving teacher. And that's the feeling at least that I got when I attended her workshop, and I had the great privilege of attending her workshop at Lams. And whether or not one agrees or disagrees with her assessments and arguments, one never leaves without examining one's deeply held assumptions and suppositions. As academics, and now I suppose I'll wear the hat of an academic, she forces us to confront the question of how we too, and the academic enterprise in itself in general, has historically been and is continually complicit in the process of othering, in the process of silencing, in the process of erasing. Erasing, in a way, lives and live worlds that don't quite belong in the very limited theoretical frameworks that we have at our disposal. In other words, she reminds us that there are other ways of being, that there are other life worlds that are not exhausted, that are not foreclosed by our very limited lenses that we choose to understand and see these worlds through. The gaze, in other words, and this is an ethic that I take from Saba that I've learned above everything else, above her theoretical arguments, more than her intellectual sophistry, her brilliant, contribution, her ingenuity, and so on. What I take from her most of all is the lesson that the gaze, as an academic, the gaze has to be turned inwards. And it has to be turned inwards in a way in which one is constantly forced to confront the politics of one's own scholarship and also one's own subject position. You can't be neutral on a moving train, to paraphrase Howard Zinn. You constantly have to turn the gaze inwards. At the very least then, the ethical impulse of her work critiques the ostensibly transparent universalism of our disciplines, or the social sciences, and their claims at understanding reality and the lived experiences of people. And as I said, her work reminds us of ways of being, of living well, that are not exhausted by the theoretical frameworks that we have at our disposal. The other thing that she reminds us of is, and I keep reminding and I keep cautioning my students, specific note, is that the language that we use as social scientists, as researchers, as those claiming to understand reality and the lived experiences of people, that language often is a language of assessment. In other words, it's also a language of judgment, which adjudicates between what is progressive, what is not progressive, what is superior, what is inferior, higher and lower, and one can add to that male, female, white, non-white, high caste, low caste, and so on. But the other thing that she reminds us of is, again, the ethics of analyses. And I say this because oftentimes, as social scientists, and I myself am guilty of that, is that our mode of analysis, and our ways of analyzing reality and so on, is also a claim of mastery, is also an exercise of mastery and control, and controlling and dominating. And so, which is why she reminds us of how analysis should be, and I quote, a mode of conversation rather than mastery, which can yield a coexistence that does not require making other life worlds extinct or provisional. And that also has, some implications for politics and for political activists of various descriptions. All those who claim to be invested in a project of emancipating, certain groups, certain subjects, including, subject of her book, The Politics of Piety, veiled Muslim women. And again, and I quote, and there's no better person obviously to say that than Saba herself, and I quote from her work, she reminds us how important it is to have a certain, I quote, a certain amount of self-scrutiny and skepticism, which is essential regarding the certainty of one's own political commitments when trying to understand the lives of others who do not necessarily share those commitments. And so I'll end, I suppose, on the ethic that, and I also mentioned this in my class the other day, the week before last. The one central ethic that I understand and that I take from her work starts off from this one central question, which is, what does it mean to confront the unfamiliar? In other words, what are the ethics of confronting the unfamiliar or the seemingly unfamiliar? It's a question, obviously, that is especially resonant and especially pertinent for ethnographers, but it's also a question that is equally resonant and pertinent for historians. And as a historian, one is constantly confronted, not simply by the alterity of the archive, but also by the alterity of worlds that are far different and very alien from the world that we inhabit. In other words, the world of the past. And so that encounter, also, has ethical implications of how we choose to tell the stories of these worlds that are long past us. And this is where I, as a historian, learned from Saba in a way. And Saba's then, and again, there's no person better, placed to articulate that. Saba reminds us of the possibility and the ethical responsibility of critique. And I quote, she says, critique is most powerful when it leaves open the possibility that we might also be remade in the process of engaging in another worldview. That we might come to learn things that we did not already know before we undertook the engagement. This requires that we occasionally turn the critical gaze upon ourselves to leave open the possibility that we too may be remade through an encounter with the other. And as I told my students the other day, some of you are here in this room, that this encounter, constantly reminds us of the importance of opening ourselves to the possibility of being unmade, of being remade. And that is an ethic that I have learned from Saba Mahmood, the teacher of teachers, Ustad Muti Ustad, and long may she continue, long may she live, long may she continue to inspire and to teach. Speaking for myself, I can safely say that she will continue to teach me and my students for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina.
बहुत शुक्रिया कामरान एंड एवरीबॉडी एल्स जिन्होंने ये ऑर्गेनाइज किया। सबा इतनी मोहताज स्कॉलर थी कि एक चीज़ जो हम अक्सर भूल जाते हैं वो ये है कि वो एक बहुत कमिटेड पॉलिटिकल एक्टिविस्ट थी। तो आज मैं ज़्यादा फोकस उनकी पॉलिटिकल एक्टिविज्म पे करना चाहती हूँ और उनके काम की जो पॉलिटिकल सिग्निफिकेंस है उस पर करना चाहती हूँ। एक पहला जो उनकी किताब थी वो एक लिहाज से पाकिस्तान में बहुत कंट्रोवर्शियल रही, लोगों ने उसके ऊपर बहुत सवाल उठाए और लोगों को बहुत गुस्सा था उनकी किताब पर कि इन्होंने फंडामेंटलिस्ट को सपोर्ट किया है, इन्होंने इस्लामिस्ट को सपोर्ट किया है, ये औरतों को जेल में रखना चाहती है। और मेरा ख्याल है कि ये जो डिबेट थी ये इस बात को मिस कर रही थी, 2-3 चीज़ों को मिस कर रही थी और मैं उन नुकात की तरफ थोड़ी सी निगाह करना चाहती हूँ। पहली बात ये कि जैसे कि उन्होंने अपने जो आपने वीडियो देखा उसमें भी जिक्र किया और अभी अली उस्मान ने भी अली रज़ा ने भी जिक्र किया कि उन्होंने बहुत सीरियसली इस बात को लिया कि जो लोग हमसे मुख्तलिफ हैं, जो लोग कुछ ऐसी चीज़ें कर रहे हैं जो कि आपके पैराडाइम में नहीं फिट आती, तो उनके साथ कैसे डील करना है, उनके साथ किस तरह से उनको समझ के सीरियसली उनकी बात को सुन के। सो शी सेज इन द वीडियो दैट यू सॉ, शी सेज दैट व्हाट द वुमेन वर टेलिंग मी आई हैड टू टेक दैट ऑन, कि वो ख़वातीन खुद क्या कहती हैं अपनी ज़िंदगी के बारे में। तो जब आप उनको सीरियसली लेते हैं तो उसकी पॉलिटिकल इम्प्लिकेशंस क्या होती हैं। बहुत सारे लोगों ने कहा व्हेन दे वर ट्राइंग टू बी जेनरस बट नॉट रियली वाज टू से कि ठीक है वो बहुत मोहताज स्कॉलर है तो ये उन्होंने एक स्कॉलरली काम किया है, इसकी पॉलिटिकल इम्प्लिकेशंस जो हैं वो उन्होंने शायद सोची नहीं, बट दैट वाज नॉट हर पॉइंट। उन्होंने उसकी पॉलिटिकल इम्प्लिकेशंस के बारे में बहुत गौर से सोचा हुआ था और उसकी सबसे बड़ी पॉलिटिकल इम्प्लिकेशन ये थी कि जब आप कोई पॉलिटिकल मूवमेंट बिल्ड करते हैं तो आप कैसे समझें कि आपके साथ कौन है और आपके अगेंस्ट कौन है, आप कैसे बैटल लाइन्स को ड्रॉ करेंगे। सो सबा ने इस चीज़ को तोड़ा जो उस वक्त एक बहुत डोमिनेंट फ्रेमवर्क था जिसमें कि बैटल लाइन वाज ड्रॉन अलॉन्ग रिलीजन। और पाकिस्तान में तो खैर ये अभी भी एक बहस है, मतलब ये बहस ख़त्म नहीं हुई है, ये बहुत ज़रूरी बहस है कि बैटल लाइन अभी भी रिलीजन के साथ ड्रॉ की जाती है। जो बहुत रिलीजियस हैं वो एक तरफ है और जो नहीं रिलीजियस हैं वो एक और तरफ है। एंड सो शी वॉज इंस्ट्रूमेंटल इन एक्चुअली ओपनिंग अप अ पॉलिटिकल स्पेस। तो मेरा ख्याल है कि हम एक डिससर्विस करते हैं जब हम ये नहीं रिकग्नाइज करते कि वो पॉलिटिकली बहुत इंगेज्ड स्कॉलर थी, वो बहुत अकम्पलिश्ड स्कॉलर थी। उन्होंने एक दूसरा काम ये किया कि बहुत सारे लोगों ने उनको इस चीज़ पे क्रिटिसाइज किया कि जी वो सेक्युलरिज्म के खिलाफ है। सबा ऑब्वियसली सेक्युलरिज्म एज एन आइडियोलॉजी के बारे में उन्होंने सवाल उठाया। उन्होंने ये सवाल उठाया कि सेक्युलरिज्म को अगर हम उस सवाल उठाए बगैर इम्पोज कर रहे हैं तो उसकी क्या इम्प्लिकेशन है। उन्होंने थियोक्रेसी को नहीं सपोर्ट किया, यानी कि बहुत सारे लोग जंप फ्रॉम द स्टेटमेंट कि वो सेक्युलरिज्म के ऊपर सवाल उठा रही है तो इसका मतलब है कि वो ज़रूर थियोक्रेसी को सपोर्ट कर रही है, दो बाइनरीज के दरमियान लोग ऑपरेट कर रहे थे। तो उनका ये मसला नहीं था, वो ये नहीं कह रही थी कि आपने अगर सेक्युलरिज्म नहीं अपनाना तो बस अब आप थियोक्रेटिक स्टेट बना दें, वो ये बता रही थी। और उनकी दूसरी किताब में इस चीज़ को उन्होंने और ज़्यादा डिटेल में एक्सप्लेन किया कि जब आप states are secular, all states are secular in the sense that they are almost all, the modern state is secular in the sense कि modern state manage करती है religiosity को, religious ideas को, religious practices को। modern state के पास ये capacity है जो pre-modern states के पास नहीं थी कि वो individual citizens की religiosity और religious practice को manage करें। तो states तो ये कर रही हैं। और जैसे कि अभी शायद अली रज़ा ने जिक्र किया कि ये मसला नहीं है कि द इजिप्शियन स्टेट इज एक्चुअली आपने जिक्र किया इस बार कि ये मसला नहीं है कि इजिप्शियन स्टेट इज इनसफिशिएंटली सेक्युलर, مسئلہ یہ نہیں ہے کہ it is not secular in the right way. It is secular. But what happens when states manage religion? What happens to religious practice? What happens to religious ideas when the state management of religion comes together with democratic politics? جب آپ نے مائنورٹیز اور مائنورٹیز بھی بنانی ہے, الیکشن بھی لڑنے ہیں, اسٹیٹس اور انڈیویجولس کو مینیج بھی کرنا ہے, that is the complex process that Saba actually opened up for questioning and debate. تو انہوں نے تو ان کا the main thrust for her was not just to rubbish secularism. The main thrust for her was not just to say کہ جی secularism برا ہے اس کو پھینک دیں. وہ یہ کہہ رہی ہے کہ secularism تو ہے, اور انہوں نے آپ نے ان کی کلپ میں بھی دیکھا کہ secularism تو ہے, لیکن اس سیکولرزم کی امپلیکیشنز کیا ہیں. جب اسٹیٹس مینیج کرتے ہیں ریلیجن کو تو کس طرح سے نئے قسم کے ریلیجیوسٹیز پیدا ہوتی ہیں, کس طرح سے نئے قسم کے ریلیجیس آئیڈیاز اور پریکٹسز جنم لیتے ہیں, اور کس طرح سے وہ سولیڈیفائی ہوتے ہیں. یہ ایک یہ بہت امپورٹنٹ پولیٹیکل سوال ہے. ہم وہ لوگ, وہ سارے لوگ جو کہ چاہتے ہیں کہ مختلف مذہب کے مختلف قسم کے لوگ اکٹھے رہیں, برابری سے رہیں, ایک دوسرے کے ساتھ وداؤٹ کانفلکٹ رہیں, تو ہمیں ایک خالی کوئی سیکولرزم کا نعرہ ہمارے لیے کافی نہیں ہے. آفٹر دا کائنڈ آف کوسچنز دیٹ شی ہیز ریزڈ, ہمیں اب زیادہ سوچنے کی ضرورت ہے کہ ہمیں کس طرح سے پالیٹیز کو آرگنائز کرنا ہے کہ ہم ایک زمانے میں بہت کنوینئنٹ تھا کہ جب تک لوگوں میں آپس میں لڑائی ہو رہی ہے, اس ملک میں سیکولرزم کافی نہیں ہے اور سیکولرزم کا ہے. لیکن سبا کے کام کے بعد اینڈ آفٹر مینی ادرس, بٹ شی واز ویری پرومیننٹ ان دیٹ ڈیبیٹ. یہ سوال آسان نہیں رہا ہے, اب ہمیں اس کے بارے میں زیادہ سوچنے کی ضرورت ہے. تو یہ اس کی بہت بڑی پولیٹیکل امپلیکیشنز بھی ہیں اور تھیوریٹیکل امپلیکیشنز بھی ہیں. ان کا کام مس انڈرسٹوڈ آسانی سے ہوا. اس کی ایک وجہ یہ تھی کہ انہوں نے سوری, جب میں زیادہ دیر نہ بولوں تو میرا گلا بیٹھ جائے, اور جب میں زیادہ بولتی ہوں تو پلیز آپ مجھے بتا دینا کہ 10 منٹ ہو گئے. ان کا کام ذرا مشکل تھا. مشکل اس لیے تھا کیونکہ انہوں نے ایک اور کیس اسٹڈی نہیں پروڈیوس کی. مطلب پالیٹکس آف پائٹی کے بارے میں, ایتھنوگرافی کے بارے میں بہت سارے سوال ہیں اینتھروپولوجسٹ سے اٹھائے. ان کا جی یہ ایک بڑا مسئلہ یہ ہے کہ انہوں نے کافی زیادہ کام نہیں کیا, ہمیں دکھایا نہیں کہ وہ عورتیں ایکچولی کیا سوچ رہی ہیں اور ساری. اینڈ criticism, but she would have produced yet another case study from somewhere in the developing world, somewhere outside of the non-Western world, if she had done that. انہوں نے ایک تھیوریٹیکل انٹرونشن کی اس لیے تاکہ ان فلسافیکل ایزمپشنس کے بارے میں سوال اٹھایا جائے جن پہ لبرلزم کا اور سیکولرزم کا پروجیکٹ بلڈ ہوا ہے اور جس کو ہم سب نے اپنایا ہوا ہے ان مینی پارٹس آف دا ورلڈ. تو ان کا کام اس لحاظ سے مشکل تھا کہ اس کے اندر ایک بہت ڈائریکٹ انٹرونشن تھی فیمنسٹ تھیوری کی philosophical underpinnings میں. That work, especially politics of piety, is very rich کیونکہ اس میں انہوں نے بہت مختلف قسم کے لٹریچر کو لائن, مڈل ایسٹرن ویمن پہ, مڈل ایسٹرن پالیٹکس پہ, مسلم ویمن کا لٹریچر, ویلنگ کا لٹریچر, ہیبٹس کیسے کریٹ ہوتا ہے. لیکن جو ایک لحاظ سے جو اس کی اسٹرینتھ تھی اس کام کی وہ یہ تھی کہ وہ اٹ واز آلسو تھیوریٹیکلی ویری فوکسڈ. بہت زیادہ بہت وائڈ لٹریچر کو انہوں نے بہت نیرو فوکس کے ساتھ لے کے آئے کہ فیمنسٹ تھیوری کے کیا مسائل ہیں, اس کی ایزمپشنز میں سیکولرزم اور لبرلزم کی جو ایزمپشنز ہیں کہ ایجنسی ایک انسان چوائس تب کرتا ہے جب وہ ریبیل کرتا ہے. تو ایجنسی کی ڈیفینیشن جو ہے ان فار اے لانگ ٹائم واز کہ یا آپ اوپریسڈ ہیں, سبارڈینیٹڈ ہیں, یا آپ ریبیلین میں مصروف ہیں. اور سبا کی ایک امپورٹنٹ ان کے لیے یہ ایک آرگومنٹ تھی کہ ہم اس چیز کو اسٹیبلش کریں کہ ایجنسی جو ہے اس میں دونوں کا مکسچر ہوتا ہے کہ آپ ریبیلین کے کچھ چیزوں میں ریبیلین کر رہے ہوتے ہیں, کچھ چیزوں میں آپ ایکچولی سبارڈینیٹ ہو رہے ہوتے ہیں, اور کچھ چیزوں میں آپ دونوں کر رہے ہوتے ہیں. تو ایک بہت اچھا ایگزامپل جو انہوں نے استعمال کیا which has stayed with me and I use it in my teaching often is a piano player کہ جو کہ جس کو اس کے ٹیچر نے کہا ہے کہ بھی آپ 8 گھنٹے ریاض کریں. اب وہ 8 گھنٹے ریاض کرنا, انگلیاں تھک رہی ہیں, ٹانگیں شل ہو گئی ہیں, دماغ تھک گیا ہے, لیکن آپ نے کیونکہ اپنے لیے پرفیکشن کا ایک آئیڈیل رکھا ہے جس کی طرف آپ چل رہے ہیں, تو آپ کی اپنی چوائس ہے کہ آپ نے اپنی ویل کو اپنے ٹیچر کی ویل پہ سبارڈینیٹ کیا. اب اس بندے اسٹوڈنٹ کو ہم کیا کہیں گے؟ کیا وہ ریبیل کر رہا ہے یا وہ سبارڈینیٹ؟ وہ ریبیل کر رہا ہے کہ کوئی ایسی چیز سیکھ رہا ہے جو کہ شاید اس کو لوگ نہیں چاہتے کہ وہ سیکھیں. سو دیز تھنگز آر مچ مور کمپلیکیٹڈ اینڈ شی اوپنڈ اپ ان اے ویری ٹارگیٹڈ مینر فیمنسٹ تھیوری اینڈ دا ڈبیٹس اباؤٹ ایجنسی اینڈ ریزسٹنس, جو کہ یہی جو سمپل بائنڈریز جن کے ساتھ ابھی تک ہماری بحث پاکستان میں خاص طور پہ لیکن دنیا کے بہت اور ملکوں میں بھی چل رہی تھی, اس کو انہوں نے اس کو کھولا. لیکن اگین آئی وانٹ ٹو برنگ دس بیک ٹو ہر پولیٹیکل پوائنٹ, کیونکہ لوگ اکثر بھول جاتے ہیں جو ان کو پالیٹکس آف پارٹی پہ کرٹیسائز کرتے ہیں, وہ بھول جاتے ہیں اس آرٹیکل کو جو انہوں نے چارلز ہرشٹن کے ساتھ لکھا, جس میں انہوں نے ان امپیریل وارز کو ڈیناؤنس کیا جو عورتوں کو لبریٹ کرنے کے لیے کی جاتی, جو افغانستان میں اور افغانستان میں اسپیشلی افغانستان کی جنگ, بہت سارے آپ لوگ بہت یاد ہیں شاید آپ کو یاد نہ ہو, لیکن افغانستان کی جنگ سے پہلے کازموں میں اور مختلف میگزینز میں برقعے والی عورتوں کی تصویریں آنا شروع ہوگی کہ یہ وہ لوگ ہیں جن کو لبریٹ کرنے کے لیے ہمیں یہ جنگ کرنی چاہیے. So again, the question of feminist agency, the question of secularism, the question of, who is to be liberated, how, was a deeply political question. And she answered that question by opening up the philosophical underpinnings of the ways these arguments were built in popular discourse, but also in scholarly literature. So, ایک بڑا مسئلہ تو یہ ہے کہ جی کیوں؟ Why should we pay all this attention, اتنی محنت ہم کیوں کریں یہ لبرلزم کی کانٹرڈکشنز کو دکھانے میں, یہ لبرلزم کے مختلف قسم کے جو مسائل ہیں ان کو کھولنے میں. اب میرا خیال ہے کہ سبا کے لیے یہ سوال اس لیے امپورٹنٹ تھا کیونکہ لبرلزم از دا ڈومیننٹ آئیڈیالوجی پاکستان میں بھی اور دنیا کے بہت سارے اور ممالک میں بھی. اٹ از دا ڈومیننٹ آئیڈیالوجی. اٹ از دی آئیڈیالوجی جس کے آپ جہاں سے مرضی سے آ رہے ہو, الٹیمیٹلی آپ یہ ایک آئیڈیالوجی ہے جس کے اوپر سوال اٹھانا بہت مشکل ہے کیونکہ وہ ہم سب نے نارملائز کر لی ہے. وہ کیونکہ ڈومیننٹ آئیڈیالوجی ہے اس کی باتیں ٹھیک لگتی ہیں کہ ایک انڈیویجول ہے, رائٹس بیئرنگ انڈیویجول ہے, وہ چوائس کرتا ہے, وہ چوائس ویلڈ ہونی چاہیے, لیگل پروٹیکشن اس کو پرووائڈ کرنی چاہیے. اٹ از دا ڈومیننٹ آئیڈیالوجی. It provides the horizon for all kinds and various kinds of political mobilization. And so for Saba this was important کہ اس کے بارے میں سوال اٹھایا جائے کیونکہ اس کے جو مسائل ہیں اگر ہم کو, اس کا یہ مطلب نہیں کہ آپ لبرلزم کو دوبارہ پھینک دیں, اور لوگ we can do that and maybe we should do that, لیکن as a first step ہمیں یہ تو سمجھنا چاہیے کہ اس کی کیا contradictions ہیں. It is not, no ideology is perfect. And this ideology has normalized itself to the extent کہ اس کی imperfections ہمیں نظر نہیں آتی ہیں. So سبا کا کام again ایک پرچہ میں نے لکھا جو ریسنٹلی پبلش ہوا ہے, وہ نیو لبرلزم اور پائٹی پہ ہے. تو میں نے سبا کو بھیجا. اب اکثر لوگوں کا خیال ہے کہ سبا پائٹی پہ کمیٹڈ تھی, پر سبا کے لیے the commitment was to questioning liberalism. She pushed back and she said, یہ نیو لبرلزم پہ تم کیوں پھنسی ہوئی ہو؟ What is, it is just, it is a version, it is liberalism. So why don't you make the critique against liberalism? تم نیو لبرلزم کے بارے میں کیوں بات کرتی ہو؟ And we had a back and forth and I think that it is important کہ ہم نیو لبرلزم اور لبرلزم کی ریلیشن شپ کو سمجھیں, لیکن انہوں نے مجھے پش کیا کہ میں اس کے بارے میں زیادہ سوچوں اور سمجھوں کیونکہ ان کے لیے this was very important that we open up liberalism as a much more fundamental ideology to the person. So آخر میں بس یہی کہنا چاہتی ہوں کہ میرا خیال ہے کہ at least for me سبا کی intervention was theoretically very rich, was a deeply and inspiring intellectual contribution, لیکن ultimately وہ ایک بہت political contribution بھی تھی جس کی political implications have perhaps not entirely been understood. کیونکہ میرے دماغ میں سبا کا جو کام ہے وہ اس طرح سے بہت ضروری ہے کہ وہ ایک امپورٹنٹ اسٹیپ ہے ان ڈی کالونائزنگ نالج پروڈکشن. کہ ہم مختلف ملکوں میں جو کہ یورپ اور امریکہ کے ملکوں میں بیٹھے ہوئے ہیں, ہم صرف کیس اسٹڈیز نہیں پرووائڈ کر رہے, ہم وہ سوال اٹھا رہے ہیں جو فنڈامنٹل سوال ہیں جس کے بارے میں ساری دنیا کے لوگوں کو شاید سوچنے کی ضرورت ہے. اینڈ دیر آر ڈفرنٹ ویز آف ڈوئنگ دیٹ. I mean, again, there were differences in how we thought we should proceed on that. लेकिन I respect the fact कि सबा ने इस चीज़ को एक बहुत ये जो एक colonial framing है knowledge की, जिसको हम तकरीबन जिसके बारे में सवाल उठाना एक ज़माने में बहुत मुश्किल हो गया था, और अब दोबारा इसके बारे में कुछ तहरीकें उठ रही हैं, thinking about it as a second wave of decolonization. कि physical decolonization से तो हम फारिग हो गए, लेकिन ज़हनी गुलामी से हमने अब किस तरह से फारिग होने, Saba's intervention was a very important intervention in that regard.
सारा जो आप गुफ्तगू की बात कर रही थी सभा से, मुझे यकीन है कि सुन रही हैं, और काश वो यहाँ होती, और जब वो आई यहाँ 2016 में तो उनको पहली दफ़ा एहसास हुआ कि एक नई नस्ल तैयार हो चुकी है जो उनके काम से वाक़िफ़, उनको पढ़ रही है, उनको समझ रही है, और उन लोगों को भी, उनके इंटरलॉक्यूटर्स जो हैं जिनके हवाले से वो अपनी काम को आगे बढ़ाती थी, उनको भी उन लोगों ने समझा हुआ है और पढ़ा हुआ है। और ये वही मौका था जब उन्होंने ये फैसला किया कि वो वापस आएंगी ऐसे माहौल में, एक ऐसे मुल्क में जो उनको कबूल करने को तैयार था। लेकिन वो सुन रही है हमारी बात, तो हमें इस गम और कोई रंज की बात नहीं है, और ये बातें चलती रहेंगी। आप अमान।
It's a tough act to follow, man. So let's see where this goes. I'd like to begin. Can everyone hear me? I'd like to begin by sharing a small personal anecdote, a conversation I vividly recall that I had with Saba in 2015 at Rabia, or sometimes Rubina, and for me, Gurdi Masi's place, where I was talking about my interests with her in semi-audios. Right? And it's one of those disciplines that I was telling her that when I read it, I feel like I should also think. There are environments in which capacities for reflection increase and others in which they decrease, fluctuates. And so Saba sort of shared back that Alistair McIntyre was one of those environments in which her capacities of reflection sort of zoomed. More specifically, Whose Justice, Which Rationality by McIntyre. And I can honestly say that without her commendation, I would have probably not taken McIntyre as seriously as I did in the subsequent years. And I definitely would not have inflicted him on my students as I have done this semester. In that sense, I'm forever indebted to her. More formally, I came across Saba's work for the first time in graduate school in the fall of 2012 for a course that I took titled Comparative Religious Ethics. It was 10 of us at the time, and Saba's work was one of the few that was making sophisticated arguments about reason, about personhood, about our capacities to think through forms of being that, as we look at them, they look back at us askance. That was grounded in ethnography. Other scholars were wrestling through these problems, but through textual analysis, and that was refreshing. And as I thought through what to share with you all today, I reread the blog posts that we as students in that course were supposed to write for our weekly readings. And based on my reflections today on those, what I'd like to talk to you about briefly and suggestively are three broad lessons from Saba to scholars of religion, or more modestly, to me as a scholar of religion. And I share these lessons with you as an invitation to engage and re-engage with our work. The first of these broad lessons is that when thinking about religion, it is helpful to imagine it as an environment in which capacities of certain ways of knowing, of reasoning, of acting, of inhabiting certain forms of being are cultivated and authorized. It is helpful to think of religious environments as epistemic environments, as environments जहाँ इल्म बन रहा होता है, जहाँ जैसे के साथ साथ जहाँ किसी न किसी किस्म की इंसान की तश्कील हो रही होती है, as environments of subject formation as well as knowledge formation. More broadly, the lesson is जहाँ इल्म तश्कील हो रहा है वहाँ किसी साथ साथ किसी न किसी किस्म के इंसान भी तश्कील हो रहे हैं. Environments of knowledge production or knowledge generation, epistemic environments, are environments implicated in the generation and cultivation of certain kinds of selfhood and ways of being. And in that specific religious formation and the formation that we go through as scholars are loosely analogous processes. We learn to reason and form capacities of reasoning in our specific disciplines and become certain kinds of beings along the way. And this process is managed through various hierarchies in which we participate, schedules of activities, penalties and disbursement of rewards based on our performance. I just filled out a yearly faculty review, so maybe it's the pain of what I went through that you're hearing. Techniques of measuring our efficacy as academics. There are certain measures with respect to which we get formed as scholars. Self-help books होती हैं, conferences होती हैं, classrooms हैं, seminars हैं, workshops हैं जहाँ हम सीखते हैं कि अच्छा scholar बनने के तकाज़े क्या हैं. And that's not extraneous to our activity of knowledge production. It's an element of it. For the undergrads in the house, does the word 2.2 mean anything? थोड़ा दिल सहमता है ना? So जब मैं email खोलूँ और reviewer number 2 के comments, reviewer number 2 is a wild subject, उसके comments पढ़ूँ तो मेरा भी दिल थोड़ा सा सहमता है. And in this sense, Saba's work has some affinity with works such as Jonathan Schoeffer's Making of a Sage, where Schoeffer talks about what all goes into the formation of a rabbinic scholar in terms of modes of reasoning, modes of behaving, comporting oneself, and so on. So, lesson 1, जहाँ इल्म बन रहा होता है वहाँ किसी न किसी किस्म के साथ साथ इंसान बन रहे होते हैं, and it's perhaps helpful to think of religious traditions as one such environment of knowledge and self-generation. The second lesson, in the face of intractable or seemingly intractable debates, and जो debates resolve नहीं हो रही, in one's discipline of inquiry, such as for example the shape of feminist agency, what religion is, religious studies की अहम बहसों में से यही है कि religion conceptualize किस तरह किया जाए, what the relationship between religion and violence is. These are intractable debates that we inherit. Perhaps we should turn attention to the formal rules of inquiry in that discipline as a possible site for resolving those disputes. If as scholars we face interminable debates, perhaps we need to turn attention to the rules by which our disciplines and sub-disciplines work as a location for where the problem lies. Let me give you an example of sorts. Let's say एक साल 100 फुटबॉल मैच रहे, right? और हर फुटबॉल मैच के बाद दोनों टीमें आपस में लड़ पड़ी, बेचारा रेफरी भी उस लड़ाई में शामिल हो गया. तो शायद मसला फुटबॉलर्स के साथ नहीं है, शायद मसला रेफरीज के साथ नहीं है, शायद मसला with the rules by which football gets enacted and played, शायद उसके साथ है, and perhaps that's what needs attention. And I think that's a remarkable lesson that Saba teaches us through her work. So in the midst of interminable recurring debate, perhaps you should turn attention to the rules according to which your sub-discipline operates and functions. Now the problem with doing this is that you yourself will implicate yourself as part of the problem. आप भी उसी discipline में form हुए हैं ना, उस discipline में मसाइल हैं, आपकी critique कभी किसी और के बारे में नहीं होगी. And in that sense, I read whatever Saba says about feminist theory as addressed to problematic dimensions of her own formation as a scholar, as much as it is addressed to anyone else. And that's an act of bravery. If you'll allow, it'll take too much time, but in her preface, Saba talks about various ways in which she came to learn to be a different kind of scholar. I think Ali Raza has already hinted towards this by talking about gazing inward as something that ought to happen when you're engaged in the process of knowledge production. Lastly, and most briefly, the third lesson that she teaches is that those environments or regimes of knowledge production, या knowledge power, या knowledge and being, that tell us that they are fully self-consistent, कि उनमें कोई तज़ादात नहीं, that they are autonomous, बिल्कुल खुद मुख्तार हैं, और वो neutral हैं. Referees, वो सिर्फ गेम देख रहे हैं, गेम में शरीक नहीं. In regimes of knowledge production, they need to be addressed and ought to be asked questions about the why and wherefore of their knowledge production. Claims of utter neutrality, claims of utter sovereignty or autonomy, and claims of utter self-consistency, those are likely ruses that need to be worked and thought through, not in the activity of others, but as it gets implicated in our own work. And so broadly, these are lessons that me and my colleagues, was it 8 years? When was 2012? 6 years ago, that we learned and continue to learn, and in that sense, I think Saba's memory will continue to live in the various disciplines that we all inhabit.
शुक्रिया नुमान राबिया वाकई राबिया राबिया प्रोफेसर हैं लाहौर स्कूल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स में बट शी इज इन दिस रूम perhaps the oldest friends Saba had. I suppose Samia, you and I may have come a little later, just perhaps a few months later. So this is a tussle between who loves who, right?
First, I really want to thank the organizers, especially Kamran, for inviting me to this gathering, remembering Saba and being part of this tribute. My 37 year of association was more as a friend and not as an intellectual interlocutor. So I feel, it is still, I find it difficult, it is still too early to really gather and talk justly even about this friendship. So I really am borrowing from the eloquence of the poets, and but I feel I wanted to be here. I was hesitant, but then I felt she was too inspiring, she was too special, a part of my life, and continues to be. She shared, and I paraphrase a quote from Hisham Attar. She was reading him in the last 2 years a few times. It has also been a time of really, to go back and, after a long time, we were again sharing such fundamental questions of our existence. And her 2 years, I think, was such a gift to see the courage with which and what she had cultivated in these 37 years that I had known her. So it was inspiring, and I want to. And one thing that kept going through my mind was Sachal Sarmast, Mere dil vich yaar pat diya pinga paiyan, ape jhoote naal jhutave, deendar lode hazar. My friend swings in my heart on silken ropes. Swinging thus, she sweeps me to, sways 1,000 more. To remember Saba is to be rocked again in this communion. But this is no ordinary flight. Sachal says, पैर झूठे ते मोहकम धरना, रखना, रहना बे-इख्तियार. And I felt this line was what I could understand in some, it just keeps coming back every time I think of Saba. Because here was really a making of a personhood, and she never, how she really tried and successfully, I think, with great courage and discipline, hard work, tried to live up to this idea. It wasn't a making of Saba, someone who was Saba, but to live as Saba, as it was a larger promise. It was not about making of me a person, and it was inspiring. I first met Saba in 1981, so I don't know whether it's older or less. At the same time, I think we all got to know each other because she really brought a big circle of friends and So many have talked about, the same, there's such a, the same kind of superlatives sort of resonate again and again, how she could find the capacity to bring so many people together and share so deeply with them. And Saba came as a student of architecture at NCA, and very quickly she was very frustrated with what was a very narrow and I would say very prosaic course of studies at NCA. And those were two very exciting years. She would often talk about it as being a very important time for her. But it was also another Lahore, I think, a gentler, more open Lahore. There was much untended. Because we were sent to look at these buildings, so we were all, Lahore was littered with so much of old architecture, untended. Chubaji was noisy with rickshaws and people, but you could sit inside in the summer and endlessly have conversations. The longest I remember was sitting in the most deserted place in Lahore, which was Moti Masjid in Fort. In June, it was the heat, and it was so cool inside, and we could talk for hours. But so was the canal for walks in Lawrence. So I feel, Lahore and Saba for me are so, every time how she really responded to the environment and the openness. And the dhabas were not just, the dhabas were because they were where there was affordable food and most friends could join in. And it wasn't much ado about gender or anything else. It was, these places were open. Lahore was much more. And she really relished that, to be in Nayi Anarkali and drink her lassi while we waited for the number 8 wagon to Model Town. And she was never shy of using phrases. So the little Punjabi she picked up, she would repeat. And she had a great, she loved to be like in conversation. So any little Punjabi she learned, she immediately used it. And so she was going and telling him about how to improve his lassi and he delighted in it. How somebody, and the wagon wala had to wait. मैं लस्सी पी रही हूँ, लस्सी पी रही हूँ, फिर मैं आऊँगी. So this, but I'm narrating those, not, but I feel that this is, there was, I guess, she said, she would talk about how there's a leaning, but I think it's the leaning you cultivate, and her engagement with the world, and what she cultivated with that was important. I really, Bulle Shah, with Sachal, it was Bulle Shah, and I will ask my sister Ashi to sing a selection, from that kafi, but it goes, अब हम गुम हुए प्रेम नगर के शहर अपने आप नू सोध रहा हूँ ना सिर हाथ ना पैर अब हम गुम हुए प्रेम नगर के शहर खुदी खोई अपना पद चेता तब होई गल खैर. And I think it was really this city of affection to be with Saba, and remembering Saba today was about that we are again brought into this embrace of this city of affection, where we contemplate the path, where we make ourselves. It is neither about beginning with the head or the feet, where to begin. It is about, it is not easy. We are adrift in this, but it is a city of affection. It demands this. And Ashi, if you can sing that.
अपना पद चेता खुदी खोई अपना पद चेता तब हुई गल खैर तब हुई गल खैर अब हम गुम हुए प्रेम नगर के शहर।
Thank you so much, all of you. This has been so important and so moving. If there are colleagues, friends in the audience who would like to say a few words before the end, please, you're welcome. I mean, we have a few minutes. There's one announcement with your permission, Amy. Friends and colleagues in the school, in Gurmani school, at least in HSS, we've been talking about how to keep the remembrance alive, how to celebrate Saba. And we have decided to dedicate the International Speaker Series for the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences as the Saba Mahmood series of International Speaker Series. And I'm here for another year, so I'll definitely put in whatever we can. And actually, there are ideas about whom to bring, and I was talking to Saba and others. Perhaps we could ask Judith Butler or Wendy Brown, who have been great colleagues, intellectual, how should I say, what would you do? Who she sparred with intellectually, and I do know that she talked, of course, with Wendy, and it wasn't all good. But Wendy was there for her the last 2 years, almost every day. Wendy Brown, the political theorist, philosopher, was there for her almost every day, taking her for a walk, cooking for her, and so was Judith Butler, philosopher and feminist scholar, all of you know. So, but we don't know if they'll come or we can afford to bring them, but that's a utopian dream. But irrespective, the idea is that our international speaker series would be the Saba Mahmood International Speaker Series. Again, I thank all the speakers. I just have a few words to say, and most of it has been shared, but you know, when I was at Habib, I spoke about, in a personal tone, but I also shared that some of how I understood her work, which is very similar, or at least identical to what colleagues and friends have said today. There were no anthropologists today, so I had to know there was. So I paraphrased her and basically thought about how she would have conceived of her work. The world we want to change, she would say, and give it meaning cannot be set a priori. But they should emerge, these meanings should emerge from the lives and networks and practices of people themselves. Our analysis to situate within particular life worlds, rather than speak from a position of knowledge that already knows what the undoing of inequality would entail. So in a way, the idea, I think all of you have touched on it in ways, and Raza, you spoke about it as well, that the lives that are the particular worlds need to be understood rather than us speaking from a position of knowledge that already knows. This was a humble gesture on Saba's part, but a serious one, and one rooted in the history of anthropological history of deference to those worlds that are different but need the same appreciation and understanding to those lives we find objective. We need to take into consideration the desires, motivations, and commitments of those people for whom these practices are important. It is to open the possibility to ask of politics a whole series of questions that seem settled when one embarked. So the young person that some of us knew in the early 90s, 1980s, that young woman by the early 2000s had matured into the most well-respected anthropologist of the generation. And she was forcing us to rethink categories established in politics and was reframing debates in the field of Middle East studies, feminism, religion, and critical thought. And I say this again, and I said it at Habib. More than anything else, she was a deep source of sustenance, support, and courage to a new generation of scholars who were looking for a path beyond the older forms of analysis that remained inadequate in explaining the world they were encountering in this new millennium. सब अपने खानदान वालों को, अपने दोस्तों को, अपने रफ़ाक़ाओं को आखिरी दिनों में उन्होंने खत लिखे, फ़ोन किए, व्हाट्सएप से बात की। इसी तरह मेरे पास भी एक खत उनके गुजर जाने से 2 हफ्ते पहले पहुंचा। हम ईमेल का तबादला कर रहे थे। और जो आखिरी लफ्ज़ है, आखिरी जुमला है, until we meet again, perhaps on the other side of this journey. And I'm sure she wrote it to many, but that has remained with me. फैज़ के कलाम से इख्तिताम करता हूँ। आज फिर दर्द व गम के धागे में हम पुरो के तेरे ख्याल के तरके उल्फत के दर्श से चुनकर आशनाई के पास आते तेरी दहलीज पे सजा है फिर तेरी याद पर चढ़ा है बांध के आरज़ुओं के पन्ने में हिजर की राख और विसास आप सबका